Look, I'm just going to come out and say it. The Bengals should do to the Jets what they did to the Lions. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Liscow. He's your host, James Rapien. It's time to get into keys to the game as the Bengals take on the New York Jets, who are apparently, supposedly, an NFL football team, and they are an NFL football team. The Bengals will have to take it seriously, but that doesn't mean I can't talk a little bit. That game is going on Sunday. Today's episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast brought to you by McDonald's. I really liked what you mentioned yesterday. 41 burgers and 11 fries. Oh, wait, no, that was the score. That was pretty good. But today we're going to focus on the upcoming opponent, the New York Jets, who do present some challenges, and there are some areas for sure that I will be watching specifically, some matchups that we'll be looking at specifically. But overall, I'm going to repeat what I said before the YouTube music played for those of you watching on YouTube. I truly believe that this is a game where the Bengals should do to the Jets what they've done to the Lions and what they did to the Ravens. I guess it was 17, not 11. That's my bad. But the point is, yes, it's a third row game and a 3 row game stretch. Yes, any given Sunday. Yes, Ryan Finley's Bengals beat the Pittsburgh Steelers last year. But regardless of all of those things, this team is so much better than the Jets, and the Jets have a guy named Mike White starting at quarterback. This should be an impressive game, and I hope it is.
Well, and the other thing that goes into this, and you knock on wood here, but Chris Evans was the only one who didn't participate on Thursday. The Bengals aren't dealing with major injuries. And so if you're doing it that way and you're looking at these two teams and talent-wise, one team's up high, one team's really low, and there's no injuries for the team that's much more talented, and they're probably getting Khalid Kareem back. He hasn't been activated, but I would expect that to happen before Sunday's game. It's just another piece, right, that maybe could help Trey Hendrickson off the edge. So, yeah, I agree with you. Like the odds that the Bengals, there's a reason they're 10.5-point road favorites. And that's wild, and that's according to BetOnline.ag. And there's a couple factors. One, Zach Wilson getting injured. I mean, there's that is a drop-off. I know he hasn't played well. It's a huge drop-off between him and, like, anytime you say Mike White, I think of my guy, James Flight White. Okay, the former University of Cincinnati basketball player that played in like 2004. Most of our listeners either don't remember him or they don't care about the Bearcats because I'm a Bearcat. I mentioned him. So, yeah, this is a game that they should handle. And there are some things, though, that I think that we mentioned. I forget what game it was, Jake, where it was like a get-right game. I don't know if it's a get-right game because the Bengals are right now, right? They're trying to win 3 straight. But it's a clean-it-up game. And, one area that I think they could clean up, and we talked about it, Burrow. He's on pace for 19 interceptions. How about we have a turnover-free Sunday? And you can still throw your 3 TDs. That's good, Joe. How about no interceptions?
Yeah, I think that would be really something that we would like to see, right? And they're kind of YOLO interceptions lately. Like, he's really trying to make a play, and he's kind of picking his spots, right? Like, I don't know if he throws it up to the, in the general vicinity of the back pylon where Marlon Humphrey picks it off, because he doesn't get it to the back pylon if it's a 7-point game or something, or if the defense has been struggling and it's just like blow for blow, maybe you just throw it away there and take the points. But I think, he even talked about the confidence in the defense, but absolutely that's something that you and I have talked about. The one nitpick or flaw for Burrow's game right now is the proclivity to throw the interception that needs to be cleaned up.
Yep. And that's one thing that Brian Callahan talked about on Thursday.
Asked him too. He said the same thing. We turn the ball over too much. He's thrown. It makes him irritated, but he's probably thrown more interceptions this year than he's thrown in any point in his career. So those things can be cleaned up. Some of them aren't his fault. Every interception usually has a story, but just the overall number is not where obviously he would want it to be. So that's part of the factor in some of these things where we've not sustained drives as we turn the ball over in those spots. But as far as what he's done and what we put on him and how much he handles, it's been really, really impressive. He can handle so much information and so much volume of defensive information and offensive information, and where he knows what to do with it. And to me, that's the most impressive thing about him. That's what makes him so unique. But I'll say if you had to pick one thing right now, just some of the interceptions, again, not all been his fault, but that would be it.
That's Bengals offensive coordinator Brian Callahan. And the thing that he said after that I didn't include in that clip, Jake, is the Marlon Humphrey interception. That was his goal. Like, that was the read that they planned. They practiced that. And Joe, I think, told Brian and the rest of the coaching staff, like, yeah, the blitz got there quicker than I was anticipating. So he got rid of it and wasn't able to get it to that back pile, because that's where they wanted it. They wanted it in the corner of the back of the end zone.
Yeah, and if that's what they want, then I think they need to not put Samaje Perine over there and have him run a not threatening little hitch route. And it's not like never run hitch routes with Samaje Perine, but the route comes off lackadaisically, and the corner that is responsible, or the defender, I don't know if it was a corner that was responsible for Samaje Perine's right on that play, just immediately sinks off it and goes with Chase, because he doesn't care if you check it down to Perine, and they'll take that every time over getting beat over the top to Chase. So that's one thing. The other thing is, and JT O'Sullivan, I think, pointed this out in his the QB school video breaking down Burrow's game against the Ravens. If that's your plan, you can slightly alter your drop back to give yourself a little bit more of a base. So get a little bit more vertical, and instead of necessarily drifting off toward the right, which puts your right tackle in a bind, which is what happens on that play, and really having to fall off as you throw. If you get a little bit more vertical in your drop instead of so much horizontal to the right, then there's a chance for you to get your back cleats on the ground when you throw, instead of throwing it completely all arm and missing, too far in the field and too far off that pylon, which he ends up doing.
Yeah, that's a good point. And those are the things that we've seen Joe adjust to. And look, he's on pace for like 19.4 interceptions, so you round down. But I would be shocked if he finished with 19. And I did look it up, because he's on pace to shatter the yards record and the touchdown record. He's on pace for 41 touchdowns, the Bengals touchdown records and franchise records. 19 wouldn't be their interception record. Esiason did it. Ken Anderson did it. Palmer and Dalton both threw 20. So that part is kind of crazy. Because I thought he might break all three, right, and be on pace for it, but he's not.
It's a bit of a different era as well, like where you have to monitor interception rates in given years and that sort of thing. Like back when Ken Anderson was playing and Ken Riley was playing, there's a lot more interceptions in the game, because you can be a lot more physical with those receivers, for one, in those different rules. And the game only continues to benefit passers more. You now have this strike zone where you can only hit them in a certain spot. And so, maybe some former hits that are now getting called pass interference or interceptions, and those plays are getting erased. So things like this might be lowering the interception rate a little bit, but all of this to say is we're nitpicking a Burrow who's been playing really well. I would like to continue to see him manage the pocket well. And this is one place where I think the Jets can actually impact the game. So maybe we start to talk about some of those ways where the Jets do present some challenges, even with, guys like Mekhi Becton, Carl Lawson, and LaMarcus Joyner on the IR. There are still some players on this team where I want to see the Bengals perform well against some of those players that can create problems, especially in the trenches. So we'll go there next.
But I got to tell you about McDonald's, because like Jake said at the top, today's episode brought to you by McDonald's. They've been proudly serving communities for more than 5 decades, since 1965. And it's always been more than a place to get tasty, affordable food. It's a place where, win or lose, teammates gather, maybe after Friday night high school football games or basketball games, maybe Saturday cross-country meets, and you're going to get dependable Wi-Fi, endless supplies of French fries and McFlurries. It's a one-stop shop for anything you need for all ages, whether you need dependable Wi-Fi, whether it's as simple as getting a Happy Meal for your child or, your best friend's kid. If you're on babysitting duty, you can get it all at McDonald's. So check them out right now. Stop by your local McDonald's to refresh and refuel. And as always, Jake Liscow and I are loving it.
You know what else I'm loving? This matchup in general. But like I said, there are a couple of things that the Jets can do that the Bengals will have to account for. And it starts, as Bengals coaches have alluded to, with the defensive line. Quinn Williams, still a good player, especially as a pass rusher. John Franklin Myers, I talked about a little bit yesterday on the crossover. He's a guy that you maybe haven't heard as much about, who's been pretty productive for the Jets playing edge. And a guy whose name I can't pronounce is their other good interior defensive lineman, Fatukasi, I think is the last name. But I'm not going to try on the first name. But this defensive line, particularly the interior defensive line, even without Carl Lawson, still does present its challenges, is what I'm getting at, especially for a couple of guys in Trey Hopkins and Jackson Carman who were still looking to take a step and kind of catch up. And we're looking for a bounce back game from Jonah Williams on the other hand. So the trenches are still somewhere, despite the 5-2 record, despite the success, despite Joe Burrow navigating the pocket well. It's still something that we're paying attention to.
For sure. I mean, that's on the list of concerns. That's probably it, right? The interior defensive line of the Jets going up against this interior. How does Jackson Carman look? Can Trey Hopkins continue to inch his way back to his pre-injury self? And Dan Horde asked Joe Mixon about the front four on Thursday, and Mixon kind of went out of his way to praise more than just the front four of the Jets.
To be honest, their front seven is solid. They got four monsters on the D-line. Their linebackers I played against C.J. Mosley. He a dog. I don't know Quinn Williams' brother, but, I mean, he a dog. I think he a rookie, but, I mean, he be making plays. Like, he's a playmaker. They got the guy from Florida, and he's been a monster in the tape, but he's been hurt. But, I mean, I know what they have over there, you know what I'm saying? And ain't nothing going to be easy. Like, we know what type of game it's going to be. We didn't been in that position to where we're 0 and whatever, but at the end of the day, we coming into a dogfight. So with that being said, we know what we're going to get from them, and we're not going to just go in there sleeping on any team because of we know what these guys are capable of. So we got to go in there, right off the bat and, go and attack. And then right off of that, we just got to keep on going, playing complementary football, have things take care of itself. But like I said, we know what team that we're going up against, and trust me, we're not sleeping on it.
I think, Jake, that's such a key, because if they do, and it's not even get off to a slow start, because that's happened a lot this year, especially offensively. But if they just take the Jets like, oh, Mike White, never heard of him, this should be a breeze. Well, then they could look up in the third quarter and it could be a game. And you certainly don't want that if you're the Bengals. You want it to be the other way, where it's the third straight game that we're talking about Brandon Allen throwing touchdowns, or, like he did a couple weeks ago, or at least getting snaps like he did last week. So it is good to hear that Mixon says, yeah, we're not sleeping on him, but I need to see that on Sunday more so, because I think it would be easy to fall asleep having the Jets sandwiched in between at Baltimore and Baker and the Browns potentially. Like, this is the time to sleep. And so we'll see if the Bengals are wide awake or not.
Yeah, I think I'm allowed to sleep, but it's good to hear that Joe Mixon isn't sleeping, right? Like, I'm going to talk a little smack because, like, I'm looking at everything and I'm saying I don't see how the Jets hold up, just like I don't see how the Lions hold up. But again, any given Sunday, right? And so that's why it's good that you have guys like Joe Mixon who are like, oh yeah, no, we know what we need to do. I think they've had their trap game too. Like, they had their wake up call. I think, like, going into the Jacksonville game, you and I were talking about it. I think we both felt pretty similarly in that game where, yes, Trevor Lawrence is there. Yes, they have some skill players on offense, but it was such a mess from a coaching perspective, from an execution perspective, from a results perspective from Jacksonville, that turns out to be this really competitive game because they find a way to attack the Bengals and get out to that early lead. And so, to your point about the slow starts, well, maybe this is an opportunity to right that ship, right? Because one of the reasons Jacksonville stays in that game is because the Bengals' first half is about as bad as it could be. And it gives Jacksonville some life. And instead of being a game maybe where if you go up 14-0 or you're 14-14 at halftime, and then you have the second half you're not sweating it down to the Evan McPherson game-winning field goal. And instead it's a little bit more comfortable. So much like the Lions game, I'm looking for things to, again, be comfortable this week and controlled throughout the week to, again, continue to assert your dominance and show and keep up the pace of being a good football team, which is something that we're all believing at this point.
Yeah, that's the thing is good teams. Like if the Bengals were experienced and used to being 5-2, I don't think anyone would be worried. And I don't think many people are, but you're not really worried about the trap game. There's no real discussion of it because they've been there. They've shown they can handle the success. This team, I think what they need to draw from, and Mixon alluded to it there, they're used to being the Jets. There are a lot of guys that have been 1-5 and looking up and, not much hope. And, as recent as last year, like we've mentioned a ton and how brutal it was last year, especially post Burrow injury. And so all they have to do is remember how hard they were fighting then to realize, okay, well, this Jets team, they're still going to, because Mike White, you know what he's playing for? His NFL career. That's what he's playing for on Sunday. And so that's, if your guard is down, even against someone like that, who I admit I don't know a damn thing about. Zach Taylor scouted him. He told me that on Wednesday. So there you go. There's one little fun fact. It's dangerous, and you're playing with fire a little bit. And by the way, their backup, it's so funny to think about. I was listening to Dan Horde. Their backup quarterback is Josh Johnson. So Josh Johnson, Bengals legend Josh Johnson, the Josh Johnson that's been, I think, on Dan said 14 NFL teams either in training camp or not. So, it's one of those, man, could you imagine if Josh Johnson gets in the game? Gadget plays. Old friend
Josh Johnson. Yeah.
I can't believe he's still in the league.
Yeah, I can't believe he's still kicking around. I wouldn't have been surprised if you would have said 16, that he's officially played for half of the teams in the NFL. I guess he's not quite there yet, but he might get there still. The other thing that I want to talk about while the Bengals are on offense is, and John Butchko, the Locked On Jets host, talked about this with us a little bit yesterday. The Jets' young corners, Bryce Hall and Michael Carter II, have actually been a bright spot to some degree for this Jets defense. And I don't think that either are of the quality of, a Marlon Humphrey, but Stokes, the Packers rookie, Eric Stokes, the former Georgia corner, was okay-ish at times against Jamar Chase. He had a better game against Jamar Chase probably, although in many, many fewer straight-up man snaps than Marlon Humphrey did. So I'm interested to see what the Jets do in the secondary. Do we start to see teams, just cloud Jamar Chase the whole game and say, hey, Tyler Boyd, we haven't seen you for a few weeks. One of you other guys come beat us. And do they play two high safeties and say, hey, Bengals, you run the ball against, Sheldon Rankins, who they picked up in the offseason. He hasn't been great, but he's somebody I was interested in the Bengals going after, and Quinn Williams and Shaq Lawson and John Franklin Myers and our front seven that Joe Mixon just praised. So interested to see how teams may be adjusting Robert Saleh as a good defensive coach. And I want to see if teams try to take away Jamar Chase. And if they do, I want to see how the Bengals answer that call.
Yeah, by the way, hey, Jets, and I'll just give Robert Saleh, here's a little advice. You're supposed to be this great defensive mind, and maybe you are. I'm not really mad at you or anything. But how about you double team Jamar Chase? What is wrong with these NFL coaches? I get it if you have a Marlon Humphrey. Rookie schmookie. There's no way I'm going one-on-one against Jamar Chase because he just – like Joe Burrow for like 3 weeks has been like, at some point, they're going to stop putting him in single coverage. And like at some point, and so when that happens, I'm actually curious to see when that happens, what the Bengals do offensively.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Like in adjusting. And so that's what this game could be, is like a no interception. Boyd gets going. Higgins makes a couple contested catches, and Jamar Chase is on the side like he was a couple times in that record-breaking season at LSU, where he's like, oh, look at Justin Jefferson over there eating. I'm gonna enjoy this triple team here. And look at my teammate scoring a touchdown while you're worried about me.
And we have seen teams try to do this, and the Bengals have been at times, a little bit slow to respond to it because it's boring and you have to be patient and you have to take what they're giving you. And everyone's like, no, don't take what they give you. Force them to give you what you want. And that's just, that's just not how it works in the NFL. So we'll see how that goes. Very interested to see how that works out. Coming up next, James, we'll talk about the defense a little bit. I want to see them keep it going and keep those clamps on. And, well, we'll see if they can do that against the Jets coming up next.
Yeah, but first I got to tell you about Built Bars, and I got one right here. This box is empty. I have more in my kitchen. But look, I've had some say, well, how does Locked On talk about Built Bars and McDonald's? And it's pretty simple. I'm going to tie it all together for you because it's exactly how my diet works, and it's why I love Built Bars. It's called Balance. And these are the #1 protein bars on the planet. You're talking about great taste, high protein, low calorie, low sugar. And so that way, if you're snacking on these in these Built Bars, I have this cookie dough chunk one here. If you're listening, you can obviously see it if you're on YouTube. If you have that for a snack, then on that road trip on my way home from Pittsburgh or on my way home from Detroit, or maybe even in the airport, when I'm making my way back from Baltimore, guess what? I don't feel as bad about having, a burger from McDonald's or fries or something like that. So check out Built Bar right now at BuiltBar.com, whether it's coconut, the cherry barcia, raspberry, mint brownie, which is my main go-to, cookies and cream, or one of the limited editions like the cookie dough chunk. And when you're there, use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off your first order. Again, get 15% off with promo code LOCK15 at BuiltBar.com.
Well, James, the defensive line has been very good for the Bengals this year. However, I'll say this. This is an area where the PFF grades anyway have the Jets pass blocking and run blocking graded like significantly higher than the Bengals in the top 12 or 13 of both categories. And so I hope that defensive line is still on the Built Bar plan. I'm sure they are. They're very, very strong, large men. And they've generally been having their way with opposing offensive lines. And yes, I know Mike White will be quarterbacking the Jets, and I think there's probably a fall off there, even if you're not the biggest fan of Zach Wilson and what he's done to date in the NFL. But Elijah Vera Tucker, Connor McGovern, George Fant, and Morgan Moses have all been pretty solid on the offensive line. So even without Mekhi Becton, here's another fun litmus test for this Bengals pass rush. They just had 5 sacks last week, many of those of the coverage variety, but they played very disciplined, quality football. The rush and retrace idea that has been discussed a little bit. John Sharon did a great video on Sam Hubbard's game over at CincyJungle.com. So again, this week, it's not a Lamar Jackson threat. It's a run the arc and get to this young quarterback kind of game. It's a confuse this young quarterback kind of game. And this offensive line that's been playing pretty well this year, at least according to PFF. So I'm going to be interested to see how those guys play, because there are some threats on the outside too, and the skill players aren't bad, but put it all together and it's not a terribly impressive sum of parts. So the defense still needs to play well, but it's kind of the opposite of Detroit, where there's a quarterback who has been okay in the past when he's had weapons. And then in New York, I think, you have some of those weapons, Elijah Moore, not Denzel Mims. Who's the starting
Crowder,
wide receiver?
Corey Davis,
the big deep threat kind of guy, and Michael Carter, a pretty good running back, good young running back, and they just don't have the quarterback, right? And so it's kind of the opposite of Detroit that way.
Yeah, Crowder might be like, I don't know if Mike Hilton can consistently guard Crowder. Crowder's a really good slot receiver. Like, there are a lot of teams that should probably try to trade for him at the deadline. But I'm no NFL GM. You're right that some of their skill guys are a threat. And I kind of saw the vision, you build around a young quarterback. Well, now you don't have that quarterback. And something that I've been really impressed with Lou Anarumo is how the defense kind of changed for Lamar Jackson and was able to do that after playing a more traditional quarterback in Jared Goff, who, he didn't have weapons, but you wanted to see how they guarded a TJ Hawkinson and went on the road and did that. And they handled business. Well, can you go back to that? And not only that, can you confuse this quarterback? Because like this, to me, 5-sack game last week, this could be a 5-turnover game where you just force a ton of turnovers and you put some heat on him and you're hitting him and you have a scoop fumble and Akeem Davis-Gaither, who's been this close to like 3 different turnovers this season, finally gets one. And Jesse Bates, by the way, no interceptions yet. Maybe that changes on Sunday. So there are that's the thing. Again, I don't think this is necessarily a get-right game, but this is a game where – and the defense has been so damn good, it's hard to nitpick. But maybe this is where they break out and really bust open that, that plus-minus turnover-wise by having a 5-turnover forced game and 0 turnovers on the offensive side.
And I'm looking for them – maybe it's not even breaking out, just to continue to do what they've done very well this year, right? And just continue – to play well, continue to play disciplined football, and we'll see what Lou Anarumo breaks out in this game. Does he get creative with the fronts and get into his bag, as they say on the Twitter streets these days, and or does he do what he's done all year and continue to do it well?
You say that?
Yeah, what's what they say on the Twitter streets.
You've done the gritty and said get in his bag within a 4-day span. I just want to point that out there within a 96-hour span. That's pretty good.
I'm up on the times, man. I'm with it. I stay up. Anyway, where were we?
No, I got you. I want to give you one more thing that I'm like excited to see. I'm excited to see Khalid Kareem. Like I thought he was coming on. You were higher on him, I think, this offseason than I was. And then he comes in to the preseason, was a little dinged up. Then he plays and he looks really, really good. And what a shot to the arm it would be if he's shot out of a cannon against opposing quarterbacks and can contribute as an edge rusher. I'm not expecting him to be what Joseph Osai was hopefully going to be, but can he contribute in that way? Hopefully we start to see and get the answer to that on Sunday.
Well, and I think like that was when people are like, oh, what does Khalid Kareem do that Darius Hodge doesn't do? Man, Chicago Cowboys and Kareem Hodge in 1 week.
Up with the times, bad with the names. Keep going.
It's been a rough week for me for names, like the entire week, I think. But that was the context we were having that conversation with. People on Twitter were asking, what has Kareem done to earn a roster spot instead of Hodge? And I'm like, he was a pretty good player last year. He's a 5th-round rookie. He's going into his 2nd year. It's reasonable to expect that he might be a little bit better this year. And yeah, I agree with you. That's a great point. I am excited to see him. I hope he gets to play. I hope, first off, he's activated, which is certainly the trend. But if for some reason he is not ready to go, then he's done for the year, because you have the 3-week window. And then if you can't get activated after that, after they've designated you for return and you've returned to practice, you're on the IR for the rest of the year. So I think every reason to expect that Kareem will be activated. That's the signal that we've been getting. And yeah, just like you said, James, I'm excited to see him get out there and show what he can do and show that he can be a rotational piece for this team that has really kind of been down on edge rusher depth. Like Wyatt Ray's been fine and Cam Sample has been fine, but this is still an area where you and I have talked about potentially looking for deadline help.
Yeah. And so you start to get that answer. Hopefully, like I said, he could be activated. And then we'll see how good he is or isn't. And honestly, unless he just crushes it, whatever he does Sunday really shouldn't impact how they view the trade deadline, I don't think. Because even if he does play well Sunday, well, it's still not like you're like, okay, well, here's our answer against every defense, right? So, but it's still good to see it regardless. And so hopefully it's a good answer. And with that, is it prediction time for me at 3 and 4? Or do you have anything else real quick?
Yeah, 3 and 4. You better do it. I think that the question is, do you think they'll cover the 10.5 points?
No, Jake, I'm taking the Jets in this one. I think Mike Flight White.
Everybody just turned off the podcast. We just lost 7,000 listeners.
Yeah, look, there is a scenario where it's close, right? So the interior of the Jets defensive line has its way with Carman and Hopkins. Those skill guys get going. Hilton can't guard Jamison Crowder. Elijah Moore has a breakout game. The defense is just sloppy. It's just hard for me to envision all of those things happening. One might, right? Jamison Crowder could have 100 yards, or the interior of the Jets defensive line might slow down the Bengals offense early, but are they all going to happen? The answer is no. I think the Bengals roll. I think Joe Burrow kind of sets that tone of, yeah, we have a lot to do, including blow out this bad Jets team that has a guy named Mike White, who I've never heard of, play quarterback. And that was me paraphrasing Joe Burrow. So I'll take the Bengals in a blowout, 31-13.
Covering. Like by quite a bit. There you go. Good quarterbacks win, great quarterbacks cover.
Joe's been good at that. Yeah, he's been good at that. It's great. Great teams cover, but teams, yeah, either way.
Not quarterback. You know what? I'm just going to attribute it to Joe Burrow because really, what is this team if not Joe Burrow?
We're a great team.
That's true. And we have never not covered, I think. Does that make sense?
We got you covered 5 times a week. So subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. And by the way, we haven't mentioned this yet, Jake, since it's the end of the week. I'm going to make sure you give us a 5-star review, wherever you're listening. So more people can find us because, we want to be found.
If reviews are an option, which I think is iTunes primarily, please do leave us one of those. Like James said, we really appreciate that. And we do read them from time to time. And we're competitive. We're trying to stay on top of this Locked On chart, and you're the only people that can make that happen. So we do appreciate you for listening. We'll be back on Sunday after the game. We'll have your post-game takeaways and reactions to, hopefully, a 6-2 Bengals team. Until then, Bengals fans, hoo-day, and have a good one.